Hello, kind-hearted people of Earth and beyond. Welcome to the Kindness Rising podcast, the podcast that aims to inspire people to lead lives that flourish, grounded in kindness. My name is Brandon Blanks. I'm a writer and a stand-up comedian. I'm also the producer and co-host of this show. As always, the Kindness Rising podcast is brought to you by Kindness Rising. Kindness Rising is a community organization committed to inspiring, equipping, and resourcing people to lead lives that flourish, grounded in kindness, and aimed at making the world a better place. For more information, please visit our website at kindnessrising.community. There you can find out about our upcoming events, how to get involved. You can sign up for our newsletter, find out more information about this podcast, or even donate. Kindness Rising is supported solely by the generous contribution of our lovely donors. So if you would like to help support us, please go to kindnessrising.community/donate. Thank you so much for tuning in and enjoy this episode of the Kindness Rising podcast.
Welcome to Kindness Rising. This is Keith Page. I'm here with my partner in crime,
Brandon Blanks. How you doing?
And we are excited for you to join us again for this podcast. Our guest today is Buzzy. Buzzy, I'm not even sure. I know I'm going to butcher your last name. Ennis or Ennis?
Ennis.
Ennis. Okay. Yep. Just what I thought, but I didn't want to butcher it either.
No worries.
We're here with Buzzy, and Buzzy and I should know how to pronounce his last name because we go back like 20 years. But I'm super excited for this conversation we're going to have, you and me and Brandon and our listeners, to get in on just what we've been doing, Buzzy, so you know, is just saying, let's find people that are cool, interesting, authentic, kind, and that are doing things in their life that we think would be fun to explore, dive into what makes them tick, a little bit of their backstory, and then see where we go. So that's what we want to do with you, if you're cool with that.
Sounds great, man. I'm really excited to see what I will say.
Yeah, good. I love that. Yeah. Rather than, I think how we know each other and all that, that will come out in the midst of probably us swapping stories and notes and you answering some questions. I'll chime in. So why don't you give us a little background on some of your backstory? Who are you? Where'd you grow up? What was your family life like as a kid? And get us into kind of your teen, young adult years. Yeah,
sounds great, man. I have lived all over the place. I moved 50 times before I graduated from high school. And my family, we moved Colorado, Wyoming, Northern California, Southern California, North Carolina, South Carolina, all over. And at one point, we lived in someone's basement and there was no bathroom down there. So my sister and I took baths in this cement utility sink in the garage. And another time we lived above a garage in an attic. We lived above the detached garage at my grandparents' house. And it's like, the attic was not like an apartment. There was no running water. We had a camping toilet that was in a closet with like a lamp on it. And I think once a week, my dad would like carry it downstairs and clean it out. And so I lived there. We lived in a log cabin in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. So like I grew up all over the place. And
what was the reason for moving around so much? Was there
It was opportunity. We moved from North Carolina or South Carolina to California when I was maybe just a baby. Yeah, I was a baby. And I only remember that because there's a picture of us right as we're about to leave. We're standing in front of this blue panel van that my dad painted the name Jesus on the side of. And like my parents were just total like Christian hippies. And so we moved out because my mom's dad offered my dad a job basically doing grunt work on a construction site. My dad was like, I'll take it. And so we moved across the country for that. Another time we went to, I think we moved to Colorado so my dad could do some schooling there. And then he got a job. And then we moved to back to Southern California so he could get his master's degree in therapy. So a lot of it was just whatever opportunity was around. I think Jackson Hole, we went to Wyoming because my aunt had this like lodge. It was maybe 7 or 8 log cabins right on this river, and like a lodge that people could, there's country music or pool tables or whatever. And so they needed help running that. So we moved to Wyoming for that. And then it was just kind of whatever job. We moved from Northern California to Southern California because my dad got an opportunity to be a counseling pastor at a church in Garden Grove. And so it was almost all church or job related, which I guess that's why people move, for jobs. But so we lived all over, and I didn't know we were poor. I think we were like poor, but with resources, like, cause we had family that could take us in, or somebody who had a basement that we could stay in. Mm-hmm. And so some people don't have basements or attics available. So I don't think I knew that we were poor until I became an adult and went, you guys really ripped me off from my childhood. Like, what was that about? Like, so yeah, man, lived all over. Parents were awesome, fun, supportive. I think when I was in 4th or 5th grade, my mom developed a gnarly eating disorder. She was institutionalized for it a couple of times. And I mean, like, she was like crazy, like heard voices in her head, kind of crazy. And so I remember like visiting her in the mental institution at this hospital. I think, she'd been there for a month, and I'd see her maybe twice or something. And so my mom was really sick when I was growing up and didn't really understand how severe that was. But now as an adult, I kind of get it and marvel that she has overcome it, that she's totally fine now, totally healthy. My parents are still married and kind of in love, maybe, I think. So they're great. They were very supportive and very affirming and very encouraging of my zest, or my uniqueness, my humor, my desire to perform. So when I was like in 5th grade, you guys remember that movie Breakin'? Turbo and Ozone and Special K?
Yep.
Don't know it.
So I was like all about break dancing when I was in 4th and 5th grade. And at that time, my parents had like a college Bible study at our house. And after the Bible study, I would make everybody come into the kitchen where there was like a linoleum floor and watch me break dance. Oh, I would gather all these people that were trying to talk and have these conversations. Right. And I would be like, hey, you guys, you got to get in the kitchen, see this guy break dancing. I would like totally shield for myself and just make them watch me break dance.
Do you have a hat and everything? People throw dollars into it. Did you have a piece of cardboard,
See, that was a missed opportunity. But I did carry a piece of cardboard to school, and my mom had this like sewing like piece of cardboard that would unfold that she could like cut patterns on or something. And back then we would all carry cardboard around so we could do breakdance battles and do our backspins. And I had this like sewing mat cardboard thing, and everybody was like, that is so cool. So the first street cred I ever had was from carrying around my mom's sewing cardboard. And it worked, man. It gained the attention of this girl named Jill in the 6th grade.
Wow, Jill.
Success.
Have you found Jill on Facebook back in the? You still in contact with Jill?
She's in prison.
Really? Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Buzzy, I had one question. I grew up in Southern California, and I think I'm probably at least 10 years older than you, but my parents had friends that came out of the kind of hippie Jesus movement, but that was the Costa Mesa, Calvary Chapel, Southern California hippie movement.
Right.
But did your parents come out of another, I'm guessing it was going on, what I only saw happening in Orange County that often takes the credit for the hippie Jesus movement. Was it happening in other parts of the country, and were your parents caught up in, is that what you're talking about? Kind of the Jesus hippie movement a little bit?
Yeah, they were part of the Jesus people vibe, never in Southern California.
Yeah, where were they at?
Some of it might have been Northern California, like the Bay Area. We lived up there when I was young. And then at one point, my parents had a Christian record shop. It was called A Joyful Noise.
Wow, A Joyful Noise.
I remember it. I remember being a little kid, like in the day, my mom would be running this record shop and I would be spinning around on this black chair in the back office and whatnot. I didn't know what it was then. I thought maybe they just worked there. But dude, one time, so my dad would deliver records and take demos to people. And so one time he has this trunk full of records and he's looking for this address and he's a little lost. So he kind of drives down the street and then turns back around, comes down the other side again, looking for this place. And he pulls into this parking spot and he hears people yelling and he sees cops holding guns. And he's like, oh my God, what is this? And then they were yelling and he realized these people are yelling at me. Like these cops have their guns pointed at me. And he was like, hey, what is happening? And there was a bank robbery and the suspect was driving like a green car, which my dad had, and had a long ponytail, which my dad had. So they were like, this dude robbed the bank and then drove back by twice to scope the joint again or something.
Right.
This guy's
and
confident.
my dad was like, I'm delivering Christian records, man.
That's a pretty good get out of jail free card.
Right.
That almost
not too bad.
That almost looks
Not
like
too
suspicious. It's almost too good. You know what I mean? It's like, all right, buddy, Christian records. I don't know.
Dude, that's where I learned if you're going to do crime, throw a bunch of Bibles in your trunk.
That's right.
So if they catch you, you're like, I'm just delivering these Korans or whatever.
My big film in film school was that's the plot. It's about these guys that pretend to be Mormon, passing out, selling drugs in Bibles that are hollowed out. It's pretty fun. That's a great concept. Yeah.
Oh, that's like the precursor to Ozark. That was like
that's right.
Part of the story in Ozark.
Nice. Well, I'll sue them this afternoon then. I'll take my royalties.
Right
You're
on
welcome. Thank you.
right.
You're welcome for the idea, folks. Netflix or whoever. It's a Netflix show, right?
Yeah,
I hear it's a great show. I don't
great.
watch much these days, but yeah.
Well, that's very cool. So, okay, so you're obviously, I'm getting the impression, because I know you, but I don't know your parents very well. They are a little bit outside the box, and they're trying stuff. They're in some ways entrepreneurial. They're living by the Spirit. They're trusting God. All these things. There's some freedom in that. So, do you grow up with this creative energy that I know you have now, and along with the breakdancing, are you just feeling the freedom that goes along kind of with that season of life? Your parents are encouraging that. Like, could you do and be kind of anything you wanted to?
Yes.
Yeah.
And there was always a support. Maybe one of my earliest memories, I think I know what my earliest memory is. I can tell you about it later if you want, but I did a mind sweep a while back to go, what's the thing I can remember from the earliest in life? And it's a beautiful memory, but one that's right there with it is my mom bragging to her, Bible study group or bunco group or whatever it was, that my son broke unbreakable Pyrex dish. That's how remarkable my son is. So it's I did this thing that some parents would be like, oh, damn it.
Right.
And my mom was like, well, I will brag about you for this. And so I just kind of had this confidence that I'm unstoppable, because my mom specifically made me just feel like I couldn't fail. And that ended up really stabbing me in the heart about 45 years old when I realized, I can fail.
Right.
And it sucks.
Right.
But as a kid, I just felt I'm golden. I'm an amazing human being. My mom specifically put such a confidence in me, just the way that she would, brag about me to people or celebrate all these things I did. And I always had this angst to be a storyteller or a performer. When I was 5, I saw this Dukes of Hazzard book at some bookstore. It was pictures from the show. And in the very back, there was this little punch out, little, construction paper punch out of the General Lee. Mm-hmm. And towards a little 3-dimensional car. And I remember thinking, if I could get this book, I could put on a show and tell stories about the General Lee and make money. And I was confident. Like, all I needed was, $10 of angel investment, and I could have gotten that book and made money. Like, and obviously I couldn't have, but in my mind, it was like, if I have an idea, it can happen.
Yeah.
Because this was just what was put into me with all the support, and my mom specifically, she was just, still is, but just a joyful weirdo, full of life. Like in, I think 1986, she said, who wants to do a Christmas lip sync show with me? And my dad and my sister were like, no, thanks. And I was like, I'll do it with you, Mom. So we learned all these like Buddy Holly, Sandy Patty songs, went to thrift stores, bought costumes, and like we did all kinds of stuff just to put on this lip sync show. My mom set up a curtain in our living room. We got lighting. This is in the 80s. My dad borrowed like a video camera, like that you put like a
VHS in or Betamax, right? Wasn't it called?
They're the size of a VCR on your shoulder. Mm-hmm. And my dad filmed it, and my mom and I did this show. And who did we do this for? My dad and my sister. That was it. We learned all of this for my dad and my sister, but we still have this footage. And so like, it's beautiful now to have it, but looking back, it's like, what?
Right.
How magical of a mother to be like,
think of that.
Let's do some Sandy Patty songs together and just have a good time.
Right.
So she was just this, when she wasn't actively trying to starve herself to death, she was really a lot of fun.
Right.
And isn't that funny? Sometimes you hear the opposite story a lot. A lot of times people get a lot of resistance for wanting to be in the arts, and that like what's the Dead Poets Society? It's like, my son will never be an actor, sort of thing. And it's such an advantage because the world. I mean, I've worked in you don't know much about me, but I've worked in the entertainment industry for the last 10 or 15 years, I say, and the current is to not support you and not encourage you in a lot of ways. And so to have that kind of baked in is probably what you need, or a very helpful armor towards all that.
Sure. Yeah. I feel like having that family support is like, how people do it without that is baffling. Mm-hmm. Because, and a lot of people do, but it's a real gift in my life that I've never had to try and do anything without this blood family telling me like I can't fail, or they were at everything. Like every show I ever came up with an idea for, it's like, not only were they there with their friends. They would bring people, they'd promote it. They'd buy tickets from me. They would never ask to come for free. Like, so I have had and have an unbelievably supportive set of parents. They're really, really amazing. Even in my current like departure from the faith, which we'll get to, but even that, because my parents are still in the faith. My dad was a pastor pretty much my entire life. And even in this, it's like there's some wound and some sadness in it for them, but they're still just about, who are you? What do you want to be? And how can we love and support you in that? Yeah. And so that's, I don't know, an ultimate lottery ticket in life to have that.
So much to be thankful for that way, man. It's really good. Well, let's get into career, and you take this energy and creativity and passion and faith, and it seems like that's a lot of the in the mix, the ingredients, along with whatever else you want to tell us, that leads you into kind of this movement towards a vocation of Christian ministry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, growing up in it, as being a pastor's kid, and like being energetic and funny and just playful. So every adult that was around me as a kid told me that like God had a call on my life. Like I heard that thousands of times without hyperbole.
Yeah.
And so growing up, you're like, that's awesome. Like,
right.
The God
right
is what has something specific and beautiful and challenging for me. Like, and so I grew up with that as just a mantra that I was excited about. And I loved it, man. Even though I have a more critical eye for the, church world today. I loved my childhood, man, even though there's some trauma that I'm unwinding from it now. But at the time, like, I loved every year we got those like savings banks that were like loaves of bread to raise money for missions. And I put my change in it. Like, I loved that. I loved all the Christmas plays I did. And so growing up in the church was great. It's all I knew. And I had like scores of adults just telling me how great I was or supporting me and in some ways it was probably a little unfair. Like, I remember once at a Halloween costume. So in San Lorenzo in the Bay Area, my dad was the youth pastor, associate pastor, something at this Baptist church. And one year for Halloween, they turned the entire upstairs, the second story, into like a haunted house with like blood and werewolves and bodies and nooses. And then at the end, I think on the way out, I might have been handing people tracts like, hey, don't end up in a real hell. Like,
yeah, they do that where it's not even Halloween themed, it's like hell themed, and then they get people, apparently that's a thing. They do it nowadays, but anyway, I'm sidebarring you.
Dude, back then, now it's like a harvest festival, they don't mention Halloween or whatever, but back then it was like, fuck it, demons in the church, like, don't. And so it was
The Exorcist had just come out pretty recently, probably, right? Yeah.
I went to that as Dracula. I went as a vampire, and then I won the trophy for most original costume. So there was definitely a little bit of favor going on in my direction, from these adults that were running everything.
Yeah, that's.
But as a kid,
yeah.
And so when they said you had a calling, were they specific? I guess maybe I missed it, but it's like your calling was to be a performer. Was the implication, or that God?
Ministry. I'm sorry to interrupt. I always took it as like ministry. God is going to use you to share his message in powerful ways. And so as a kid, when I got in like junior high school, a youth pastor that I had named Don Rogers, who I'm still tethered to, and he did magic. And he was my first youth pastor because we moved to Southern California right as I was going into the 7th grade. And so I didn't have a friend group. And so I latched on to this youth pastor that was like the coolest dude and funny and did magic. And so he started teaching me magic. And then my best friend Derek and I wanted to be these Christian magicians that would do these magic shows and share this message. And so I was like, that's my calling. I will do this. And whatever it was, when I got into music and poetry, it was like, I will use this to share the message of God. And that probably took, 4 or 5 different forms over the years. And then when you're, a decent storyteller or a gifted communicator, and maybe I wasn't at 19, but the people in charge of opportunity at these churches recognized we can develop Buzz into something. So they started giving me these opportunities like, hey, would you run the junior high youth group here at this church? And it was like, sure, I'll figure it out. In fact, I think the first time I went to the junior high youth group in Temecula, when we moved to Temecula, I just graduated from high school. I'm 19 years old. And I was like, I'll help out with the junior high group. And I went, and I was the only adult. And so I was like, I'm in charge. Look at this. And so it was literally, that's how that started. And I did that for a couple of years, kind of learned ministry that way. And then I was into it. I liked the position. I liked kind of that I had this platform to try and inspire these kids and help them through these tough times. And that just kept growing in me. And I left that to go to a Christian college in Illinois to study music. I wanted to maybe start a Christian record label or something. And I ended up in between my junior and senior year and came back to California for the summer. And I met a girl named Beth, who's now my wife. And I ended up dropping out of college after the first day of my senior year because I was like, I've got to get back to California and be with that girl Beth some more. And so I left school, never finished my degree in music. And so my Christian record label never got off the ground, you know.
Wow.
To the world's disappointment. They wanted another Christian record label, I think.
Yep. It was going to be the next layer of A Joyful Noise.
Correct. A joyfuler noise. Yeah.
Joy Division full noise, maybe something cool. Something alt, you know, you want to get it.
Right.
Love will bring us together.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, there is that sense when you become a Christian, you kind of want everything to just be a Jesus thing. It's like, oh, it'll be like a Christian donut shop. It'll be a Christian gym. Why isn't there a Christian bank? You know, that we're not going to get into it, but I was a born again for about a few years ago. And so there's an interesting wanting everybody to play on Team Jesus. You see the potential in everybody, you know, or like the potential in any idea can be a Jesus idea, you know. Right. It's kind of fun. Do you?
Yeah.
So
I
then you
understand that completely.
So then you did ministry. So after that, you did youth stuff, and you said so you followed your heart, which is the calling we all don't ignore. Can't
to Beth.
Mm-hmm.
To Beth.
Mm-hmm.
And I came back to California to be with Beth. Was just waiting tables. We got married, and I was just waiting tables. Oh, but check this out. So I met Beth, and we were just like, I came home from school for the summer and was supposed to go to Europe for like half the summer with some friends of mine. And I met Beth like right before that. And so we just hung out for a couple of weeks, and I was like, I do not even want to go to Europe. I just want to like hang out with you, but I had to go to Europe. And so, oh shoot, I totally just forgot what story I was starting to tell. What did you say right before this? You said,
follow the ultimate call.
Yeah, the ultimate call.
Follow the ultimate call
of your heart.
Shoot.
We all have trouble refusing.
I had an amazing story that totally just skipped my mind. But so I came home, hung out with Beth. I'm just going to keep telling the story until I come back to it.
It'll come.
And then I ended up telling Bethy, I was like, hey, I got to go to Europe. I don't want to go. But I was so enamored with this girl, but I'd committed to my travel mates that I was going to go. And every chance I got over there, I called Bethy, but I didn't know how to use the phones. This is pre-cell phone. This is 98. So I called Collect, and our Collect call phone bill was more than my round trip airfare to Europe and back. We beat it by $6. And so when I met Beth, everything was over. And, here, I got it. And so we hung out. I left Europe, came back, and we're hanging out for the summer. And one night we're at Denny's at like 1 a.m. It's the Denny's kind of off the 5, kind of over by the Irvine Spectrum. I don't remember the street, but we're in Denny's, 1 a.m. And I say to her, hey, the only thing keeping from really diving into you head first, and we've been hanging out for about 6 weeks at this point, I said, is I really don't know where you stand with God. And I said, and even though it doesn't look like God is a very important part of my life right now, I know that God is going to be a central part of who I am. And if we got married and had kids and I wanted to raise them one way and you didn't, I said, which is a really weird thing to say to somebody 6 weeks in,
right? I
think. But, and Bethy at the time in Denny's said, you know what, if I have kids, I want to raise them in the church. I want the church to have a God. I want the God to be Jesus. And if the Bible's the doctrine, I don't care what the church is called. And I was like, well, hell yeah, that's good enough for me. So I proposed right there in Denny's. It was one of the romantic Denny's, though, not like kind of one of those ones. Like there was no La Quinta Inn by it. You know, it was a nice one.
It was a good one.
Standalone.
And so that was it. That was like, I'm into you, but what's God to you?
Right.
That was kind of like the final kicker. And at the time, like I wasn't going to church. I was not doing anything, but that was kind of the proposal moment. It's like, where are you at with God? And so she's been on this ride with me through becoming a pastor. Because when we met, like I wasn't even going to church, let alone like talking about becoming a pastor. So when I became a pastor, she was just like, all right, I'll support you in that. Oh. And Bethy never cared about like being a pastor's wife. I know people that are like, that's kind of an excitement to them, or a pastor's husband or something. But like, Bethy was like, She didn't like it. She was supportive of it, but people would meet her, and especially when I was the lead pastor of the church most recently that I left a couple of years ago, people would meet her and kind of just, not have just like, oh, hi, nice to meet you. And then somebody would go, oh yeah, that's Pastor Buzzy's wife. And then those same people would be like, oh my gosh, I didn't know who you were. And then she would be like, that's why you're interested in me?
Right.
I don't care about that.
Yep.
Like, if you like me, but don't like me because I'm tethered to somebody. And so yeah, she came with me along the ride of ministry, but was supportive every step of the way. Like, when I was a youth pastor, she was right there mentoring high school girls. And when I was speaking at Sanctuary all the time, which is about where you and I kind of, our paths kind of got tethered.
Yep.
And she was there sometimes, but we had a baby. And so she kind of was like, I can't hang out on Monday nights until 10 o'clock anymore. That's just not how it works. And so that's where, my profession kind of separated from her and I kind of having this faith together, like a family church might be an important thing to them. And it was like, when it's my profession, and I never required or asked her, like when I got one job and they asked what Bethy's role might be. And I said, Bethy might not even come to this church. Like, you guys need to know that. Like, I'm not going to have any expectation. You're hiring me. And I told Beth that many times, especially when I was the senior pastor. You can go to a different church if you want, because a pastor's wife can't really go to church. Yeah. Like, she couldn't get through the parking lot without someone stopping to tell her how much something meant to them or whatever. Yeah. And so
such an extension of the pastor, right?
Yeah. Or the way to get a message to the pastor or whatever it is, it's not nefarious. It's just the culture.
So do you want to tell us what that, because so that was, how many years then, Buzz, were you in the system of what we call, the church world?
Yeah. About 20. I was a pastor for about 20 years. I mean, if I count those 2 years where I was kind of running the junior high ministry, that was 93 to 95. And then, I studied music in Illinois for a little while. But even though I wasn't really super involved in church at that point, I was still like playing on a worship band for college credits, and so I was doing all of that. And then I was a youth pastor at a church in Garden Grove, and it was the church that we originally moved to Southern California so my dad could be a pastor at.
Oh, wow.
And it was, so I grew up at that church. And then when I was, 25, 26, the pastor at that church called me and asked if I'd be interested in interviewing to be a youth pastor. And at the time I was waiting tables, and I was like, yeah, let's do it. And so I was stoked to get that job. I was very excited, like that was, hey, I'm going to pay my bills by hanging out with these kids and studying the Bible with them. That felt dreamy. And I think I started at like $33,000 a year. And at the time it was like, we're going to retire soon. Is what it felt like,
Yep.
And then I did that for 5 years, but there was always this, and I don't know if it's because I moved 50 times before I graduated from high school, that there is this rhythm in me that wants to go. Like I don't want to be somewhere indefinitely. And so, after 4 years at the youth ministry in Garden Grove, I was like, I think I'm done. I stayed an extra year, and then it was time to go. And then from there, I went on staff. It was a Free Methodist church. The denomination was Free Methodist, which is kind of just a middle of the road, holiness movement church. And then I worked for like the conference that oversaw all the churches in Southern California. So they brought me on to kind of just work with all the youth pastors. I think they just kind of went like, we don't know what to do with this guy, but we don't want to let him go.
Right.
And so they just kind of made this job for me.
Yeah.
And
it's like corporate. You know, it's like, well, do we want to be a store manager? I don't know, but let's just keep them. So corporate hired them, right?
Correct. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And that was cool, because I got a small raise. I think that got me up to $40,000 a year.
Ballers, man.
And it was like I was working from home. I only went into the office one day a week. I would just drive and hang out with youth pastors. And I was like, this worked out pretty well. I was very happy with that. And I did that for about 2 years and then went kind of bored with this. And that's when we drove around the country in the trailer for about a year. And after that is when I really hooked up with Buzzy at Sanctuary, where we kind of our paths crossed right around then. And then I was at Sanctuary for a couple of years and then left that to
Sanctuary
move out to
a church
Elsinore.
Or? Oh yeah, describe Sanctuary, Buzz.
Yeah, so Sanctuary was this incredible place. When Bethany and I first got married, a friend of mine that I'd grown up with, that I met at that Garden Grove church when I was in the 7th grade, this dude's name was Jason Lorkey, and he's a worship leader, and he was leading worship for this Bible study on Monday nights that was filled with like young people. And so we drove from Orange down to, Capitol Beach Calvary on Monday nights. And this dude named Marcus McClure, who was like a big Calvary, family, the McClures. And so Marcus was teaching the study. And Marcus was the first pastor that I was just like, wait a minute, he's letting church be different. And my introduction to Sanctuary was our friend Jason, who was leading worship, told Marcus, hey, I know 2 guys, they're hilarious and super creative. We should bring them to do something on a Monday night. And so Derek and I were like, what are we going to do? And we didn't know what this place was. And so we made up a dance. And it's not a good dance. We're not dancers. It was just like, we'll do this move 4 times, then this move 4 times. And there were some people that watched it that were like, what the hell are these guys doing? While we're taking up the offering. And then Marcus got up and he was like, well, those guys are cool. And so we were like, what? How is this guy cool with what we just did? It was so ridiculous. And so we started going back and hold on, I can't talk, but my son's messing with me. The one that I thought was pranking me to get him to go to school today. And so Marcus started having me come back and read poetry or do something creative to open up the service every week. And that was my experience of, wait a minute, church is welcoming the arts here. And when I was studying music in college, the biggest discussion was about how lame Christian art is, that it all has to be utilitarian. You can't paint a tree. You got to make branches kind of look like a cross, so people know. Right. And so that was the discussion at the school. And then I find Marcus and Sanctuary, where they are letting creativity exist. And so Marcus just opened my mind up to here's a church that's allowing for creativity. And part of it was that he would let me perform or do a poem that wasn't about Jesus. It was just about life. And so for me, that was the first time I'd ever experienced that. I can get up and just read a poem about falling in love with this girl and dropping out of college, and that's that. And he was like, yes. Okay. And so I fell in love with this place. And Marcus started having me preach, and he'd give me opportunities to speak. And so that was kind of at that point, that was before I was a youth pastor in Garden Grove even. And so I really feel like I kind of developed my ability to be a preacher there with Marcus, because I was kind of mimicking how he would tell stories and how he would pick out a scripture and then just kind of share a real life example about it. And so I really kind of learned from him, and then had opportunity to speak twice a week when I got that job in Garden Grove. And so, when I left that youth ministry and came back from the road, at that point, Sanctuary had morphed a couple of times. and there was this Hawaiian dude named Eric Botello, who was kind of in charge of it. And he was like, Buzz, would you come do this with me? And at that time, I was interviewing for a job at Eastside Christian Fellowship up in Fullerton. And I didn't get the job, but this kid named Ian DiOrio got the job.
Oh, no way.
Wow.
So, truth. Yeah.
Wow.
And so when the guy called me and said, hey, Buzz, and I'd been interviewing for like months. Their interview process was months long.
Yeah.
And he finally called, and like all my eggs were in that basket. And he called and said, hey, we're going to go with someone else. Guy's name is Ian DiOrio. And I was like, I know Ian. He and I have performed together. We've done like art church shows together. Like Ian would DJ and I would preach over him DJing.
Wow.
And so we had like so much fun together. We did all kinds of stuff. And so he ruined my life by taking that job from me.
Right.
And then that's when Buzzy said, hey, come do this stuff with us. And Sanctuary didn't have any money. And so I cleaned pools and would preach on Monday nights and did that until I moved to Lake Elsinore to go on staff at a church that my dad planted. And the word like church planting, I grew up in the church, so I didn't know that parlance was kind of unique to churches. So when I met Bethy, who grew up Catholic and didn't know anything about like evangelicalism, and I told her my dad planted a church.
Oh, yeah.
And when she first met my dad, she non-jokingly said, Buzzy told me that you started your own religion. and my dad, like, I might have said that to somebody so that when they met my dad would kind of be put on the spot as though so my dad went, really, Buzzy told you that? And she's like, yeah, like, tell me about it. And he's like, well, I didn't start my own religion. I started a church. And so that church grew. And then eventually my dad hired me. And when he retired, I was hired as the lead pastor at that church. And that's where I was. I was at that church for almost a little under a decade. I think I started there in 2011. And then I was the lead pastor, I think, for about 4 or 5 years. And then that was in like a week. It will be 3 years since I left.
Wow.
In about a week. October 20th was my last day there.
2019?
2019, yep. 2019.
Wow, dude, what a journey.
It's been all over, man. It's honestly, it's kind of fun to recount so much of it for you guys because, you know, like even playing with the timeline, like, oh yeah, that was before this. Like, I don't think about it too much.
Yeah. So we can, you know, part of me wants to dive into what was all the 20 years of learning and what all was that like. But really what I want to get to, I think for tonight at least or for the show today is what led to, or what all led to you deciding to leave. If you know.
I know some of it. But like I'm still unwinding and finding language in it. But Keith, you're one of the safest people in my life. And so I'm completely fine chatting with you about all of it. There's somebody else just asked me to go to lunch, and I love this person, but I don't know that I would be able to have the conversation with them without them pushing back on things or like, well, no, that's not what that scripture means. It's like, oh, okay, I don't want that conversation.
Right.
But so when I was cleaning pools and preaching at Sanctuary, I was listening to podcasts and listening to Rick McKinley up at, I think, Imago Dei out of Portland. And I was like, how is this guy preaching like this? This guy is one of the best preachers I've ever heard. I want to preach like this guy. And one time, the podcast had a guest preacher, and that guy said, hey, Pastor Rick is, he's in New York. He's getting his doctorate in preaching. And it was that moment where I was like, oh, he's educated. That's why he's so good at preaching. Like, I had no education. I dropped out of getting a degree in music. And so I didn't even finish college. Technically didn't graduate from high school. So never felt like the academy was for me. And when I heard that said about Rick McKinley, I was like, I have to get educated if I want to be a preacher. So I went and got like enrolled in a master's program at Azusa to get a degree so I could like learn and hopefully become a better preacher. And in seminary is really the beginning of like where some of those real questions come in, because you start learning things and you're like, I was never taught this growing up or in the church. This is the belief. This is what it really is. Like the first century church believed that. Nobody's ever told me that. And so you kind of start seeing, or I started seeing all these cracks, but you have, I had in Christianity get out of jail free cards when it came to critical thinking, because you would go, well, God is loving, and yet there's all these accounts of God destroying people or whatever. And like I would go, yeah, well, God also gave us free will. And so with free will, men are going to do evil. And so you kind of like have all these like terms or phrases that I would use to stop myself from pressing into those doubts or those gaps in biblical theology, or at least gaps that I perceived. And so they were there, man. And I was ignoring them and occasionally kind of trying to like talk with someone about them. And like probably like all along, there was probably some part of me that was like, I don't know if I really belong here in the church, even while I was a pastor, because there was so much of me that I had to repress, to fit, to belong in the Christian world. And I hated talking about that because nobody ever accepted that. I would say that and people would go, God wants all of you to be in existence as a pastor. And I would always just go, I cuss, like I can't say fuck while I'm what are you talking about? Like, and I like to get drunk sometimes, and my humor is just crap. And so there was this like bifurcation of me of like, here's who I really am with like my friends. Keith, like you saw all of me, you saw those parts of me, because like a lot of times pastors get with other pastors and we'd be like, okay, we can kind of let loose a little bit. Like a pastor conference is like hedonism a lot of times, man. Like,
right.
Like they're all drinking and
really
smoking
bottled up too.
and,
Must be intense. Yeah.
like I heard it said somewhere.
I know what you're going to say. This is hilarious.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So like
it.
At these big like conferences, like pastors conferences, like Catalyst or whatever it was back when that was kind of a pastoral thing, they would say like, there was never a spike in porn purchases in the hotel as much as when there were like pastors conferences there.
Oh, really?
Because pastors would be like, hey, we're away, we're here.
Yep.
And so I felt
that's what your church dollars are going to, folks.
Right. That's right. Give big. Yeah.
So I felt like so torn all the time of like here's who I am, but here's, and I felt both were true. I felt like what I'm saying as a pastor, the encouragement I want and the life like that I want to help like parents reconnect with their kids, and I want to help people that are depressed and miserable find peace and joy. Like all of that was real and true, but in the church you have to do it in this very rigid cookie cutter. And when I became the lead pastor, I started doing CrossFit in my town, and quickly was like just becoming really good friends with everybody there. And the owner of the CrossFit gym and I became buddies. And I remember once I told him a joke, and the joke, I cussed in the joke, and I did it like, it was kind of like the canary in the coal mine, like letting him see, hey, this is kind of a real part of me that you would assume isn't there because I'm a pastor. And he's told me once, before I knew you, I didn't know that pastors were real people. And so like, and I liked that. That was like a badge of honor to me, that like, I can be this pastor that he recognizes as a pastor, but I can also let him see all of me. Yeah. And those people are so rare for me. And so like that tension in me grew as my understanding of the Bible grew, and as my faith in the Bible deteriorated, from having been told it's one thing, and then as I got into it, started realizing like it cannot be what I was told it was. It doesn't hold up to that. And I tried to make peace with my crumbling understanding of the scriptures as kind of this like massive authority by like ignoring certain parts of it. So my church, there were people that believed the earth is 6,000 years old and the Garden of Eden was a literal account of the beginning of everything. Mm-hmm. And I probably believed that as a kid because that's what I was told.
Right.
I was like, oh yeah, okay, cool. Adam and Eve, that sounds great. And then you get a little bit older, you learn a little bit about science and whatever, and you're like, wait a minute, we can't be 6,000. This doesn't make any sense. So I would like mention very gently the poem that represents the account of creation at the beginning of Genesis. Mm-hmm. I would say that. Yep. So I could talk about the creation account and feel like there was still some verisimilitude in it because I wasn't saying this is a literal creation. I would call it a poem. Yeah. And then I started like having to avoid more and more parts of the Bible. It's like, I cannot preach that without straight up lying. And I was, saying things in my head before I would say them out loud, like checking, can I say this without lying? And toward the end, the best way I can say it, and Keith, I'm pretty sure I've said this to you before, I was somewhere between 40 to 60% con man. Mm-hmm. And I justified it because I felt like I was still doing good, and I remember thinking like, when I used to do magic, I didn't really like cut the head off the bird. Mm-hmm. I just made people think I cut the head off the bird and then brought it back. Was I lying or was I doing something good? Right. And so I would be like, I'm not lying, by saying these things about the Bible. I'm doing something good. And so it was literally me justifying it like that because toward the end I was like, man, I'm in my 40s. I don't think I'm equipped to do anything else. This is the only thing I've ever done. This is the only thing I'm educated in. Like, I have to make this work. And so I was trying, man, to make it where I was looking for, how do I justify this belief about God? And so my entire faith became me looking for language that didn't sound idiotic so I could describe like what I believed in without feeling like an imbecile. And so I would look for, and Keith, I got a lot from you, and that sounds bad to say like I'm looking like an imbecile. I got a lot from you, but like I got a lot of good language from you. Yeah. That it was like, I can say that. Right. I can trade on that statement. Mm-hmm. That will carry me for a while. And so my faith was trying to just become this collection of like bumper sticker kind of theological concepts that like I kind of was able to use those to make sense of things. But one of the first things that went for me was belief in the afterlife. And part of that came from seminary when my one professor said, one professor was like, do you know we're going to live forever on this planet? I was like, come again? And he was like, this planet, the New Jerusalem, when this earth is redeemed, we will live here forever. And I was like, fuck, dude, I don't know what's happening right now. Like, I met with that pastor. His name was Kent Walkemeyer, or that professor. I said, can I meet with you early next week? And so I got to his office and I was like, the forever on this planet, how new, who developed this? Is this brand new? And he's like, this is what the first century church believed. And I was like, it all just feels like guessing now. Right. Like, I don't know what's happening. Right. And so in between feeling like a con man a lot of times, which I am honest to a fault. And so that was eating me alive. I was like, I hate that I have to like be so careful with every single word so that I don't out myself, so that I don't get fired, so like Beth was with me once when somebody was asking me about heaven, and she watched me like just pretzel myself. And I would have to say things like, well, the belief that the Bible states is this. So it's like, not my belief. This is what the Bible's.
Right.
And like, that really was eating me up. And so I was miserable. I probably should have left 2 years before I did, for a variety of reasons. Keith, you were the first pastor I knew that was like, I'm not only going to welcome gay people, I'll do a gay marriage. Right. I will do. And that was a big deal. Mm-hmm. I remember going like, I admire that, but I couldn't do that. I can't have that fight. And I remember you telling me once, man, I am getting pummeled. Like everybody's coming after me for this. And I was like, well, thanks for doing it, man, but I'm gonna be over here in my safe Christian bubble with all the straight people.
Right.
And so, in fact, this morning, I went to breakfast with my dad this morning, and I was telling him, I think it was for my birthday one year, my whole family, Bethy, my parents, my sister and her husband, we all went to this winery out in Temecula. And there was this woman at the bar, with a glass of wine. And I just kind of like, she could tell I was with this family. And like, I think she could tell that that's my wife. And so I walked up and I'm flirting with her and just kind of playing, how are you doing? Well, you want to share that wine with me? Just being a goofball.
Right.
And she gave it right back to me. She was in. She was like, I get the game. Let's play. Mm-hmm. And then a few minutes later, another woman showed up, and it was like her girlfriend. And I instantly just brought her into it. And so at one point, I think I had both of them kiss me on the other cheek. It was just so fun.
Right.
And then like they were from Vegas or something. And the next time they came into town, they called me, and I think we went to lunch. And so it was just, and they knew I was a pastor.
Yeah. And
then about 6 months later, they called and left a message, said, hey, Buzzy, please call us back. We have something we really want to ask you. And I was like, they're going to ask me to do their wedding.
Yep.
I know it.
Yep.
And I didn't call back. I was a coward. I was a full-blown coward, because I was like, how do I tell these people that like clearly I like,
right.
clearly I connect with,
yep.
I belong to an organization that would not allow me to participate in you guys proclaiming love for each other. Yeah. And that's a really fucked up thing to have to say to somebody.
That's fucked up, man. Yeah.
And so like, I was a coward. I was like regret it. And I was just telling my dad about that today. And so about a year before I left ministry, I was like done. I was over it. I got to get out of here. And one of the issues was this. It was like, because there were some homosexual couples in my church, and every time that the first time that they were there, I knew who they were because their kids were coming to the youth group. I walked up, shook their hands, and said, you guys have great kids. And I said it specifically to let them know, I know who you are. I know you're a family, and you're cool. Mm-hmm. Another time, a lady called the church and said, hey, I'm curious if my family would be welcome there. And I was like, well, why wouldn't you be? And she said, well, we're not traditional. We're two women, and we have a kid. And I was like, well, let me tell you. And I would break it down. You're welcome here. We love you. I can't promise that if you guys are holding hands, there won't be people that glare. But even then, it was like, I got down to where I was like, let's define welcome. Because can you come here? Sure. Can you serve communion? No. Can you teach in Sunday school? I know your kids are in there, but no. Right. And it was just like, how do you reconcile that? How? Right. And I remember asking a pastor, so like I should leave, right? A friend of mine who was a pastor of another church that I was connected with, and he was like, well, not because of that. And if somebody asked me that today, I would be like, yes, you leave because of that. Right. That's a big deal, man. Yeah, and like, I had like friends that I respected telling me like, it's not that big of a deal. But like at the time I was just like, and so a year before I ended up leaving, actually, that's a very like Clorox way to describe it. A year before I imploded, crashed my life, and tried to ruin everything and almost destroyed my marriage. A year before that, I asked my boss, I was like, hey man, can I say I don't know? about homosexuality? Am I allowed to say that? And I was basically told no. Like, when we ordained you, you said that you were in line with the Articles of Incorporation of blah, 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 blah. And we just want fidelity to that, which is fair for that organization, I think. Like, here's who we are.
Right.
Do you want to be a part of it? And at the time I was like, I do. And so a year before I left, that was still in my head of like, can I at least say, I don't know? Do I have to say that this cannot be holy? Or, and like, I remember one woman came and said, can I bring my daughter in to talk with you, because she's off at college and she's in this lesbian relationship. Will you talk to her? And I was like, and tell her what? Like, I'll tell her, like, be holy no matter who you like. Right. What do you want me to? Right. And dude, the crazy thing about that is, like, the mom brought her daughter in, and I said basically that. I was like, hey man, I'll talk to you about holiness and not heterosexual or homosexual. I'll talk to you about holiness, and you got to be holy no matter who you are. And then, like, the next week, like, their whole family came to church. And when I met her dad, I was like, her dad is gay, 100%. This is a gay man. Right. Like, this is undeniable. Like, and so it was just like, I don't know what I am doing. And so all of that was in me. I'm 40 to 60% con man. I am no longer in line with the theology, at least of this denomination. I don't think I have ever felt fully able to be myself while in a church, especially as a pastor. And that all felt horrible, but I was terrified because I've got 3 kids. I got some lawn furniture. Like, what do we do with all of this stuff? Like, and so I was drinking like crazy, literally like a bottle of whiskey by my bed, you know, so Beth would be asleep and I would just be sitting in bed with a bottle of whiskey. So it's like, and it wasn't even like it was bad, you know, it was like very, very unhealthy. And I think there was only one time that I had to preach while hungover. And I remember like thinking like, oh God, this is really bad. Like, how do I hide this? I was laying in my office in between services, like going, I just can't throw up while I'm on the stage. Like, it was rough, man. I was in a really, really bad way. And then one Saturday I was on a treadmill at the gym, and like my thoughts were really running amok. And like the thought that scared me was, what would it be like for my kids to grow up without a dad? Like, let's just play this out. And I was like imagining my kids at all these different stages of their lives, but without me being around, because I was like ready to step in front of a truck or something. I was like, I don't want to feel what I'm feeling. At the time I had undiagnosed and unmedicated bipolar 2 disorder. And so I was just a whole host of these messes. And so I imploded, and I went to my boss and I was like, hey, so I'm thinking the world's better without me around for me. And they said, well, let's go ahead and get you a sabbatical. And I was like, let's do it. And they said, let's get you, 3 months. We'll send you to some retreats. We'll let you rest. And it's not even to say you can come back stronger. We want to give you space to figure out what to do. Like, if this is right for you, if not, if we need to help transition you into something else. And so at the time I was like, this is great. This is going to be wonderful. Just a reset, a breather. And if I come back, if I don't come back, whatever. And then I made it to the day, and like they were saying, let's get you out now. And I said, how about in 2 more weeks is when I'll start. That gives the church a little time to say goodbye to me. And that last 2 weeks was a bad plan because I was dying. But I thought, this was my thought. I don't know that I've ever even admitted this out loud, but I was like, I'm not going to have to do anything this last 2 weeks except kind of preach. So I can kind of stretch that as an extra 2 weeks of sabbatical. But I'm still like having to go to these board meetings and whatever. And so it was a bad idea. So the last Sunday morning, And it's right now just occurring to me that there are people that maybe were part of my church that are going to hear this and be like, that's what happened. And so, because there's rumors, but nobody really knows. And so I do my last final Sunday morning before the sabbatical, and there's all this celebration and like, we're going to be praying for you and all of that. And then that night I came home, was so ready for the release. I got blackout drunk, and I woke up on a couch with my bandaged head with an open wound that I don't remember. And my son saw me and asked Bethy, what's going on with Dad? And she was like, he drank too much. That's what's up. And he's passed out on the couch, and I'm sorry you had to see it. And then when you're blackout drunk around people, you do not make good decisions. Right. And so there was some stuff that was I was told hey, you did this and this and this. And I was like, good God, I have flashes of that, but don't remember all of it. And so at that, Bethy and I were like, is this repairable? And so there was my marriage was kind of touch and go. And so at the end of the very first day of my sabbatical, I called my boss and I was like, so here's what happened. And he was like, okay, we're probably not going to send you to those retreats then. And let's talk about, how we let the church know you're not coming back. It was very evident, the first day. And I remember even asked him, do you guys have to fire me or can I quit? What was protocol here? But I'm done. Wow. And so it was a really, really turbulent exit. But it was, it was like a bubbling up, a volcano of you're not happy. You're not at peace. You don't belong here. You don't even believe this stuff anymore. Right. And you're drinking to avoid it all. And the one good thing is even after they said, okay, clearly you need a break. And they weren't even done with me. They were like, let's just give you some time and then maybe we'll put you in a different church to heal. And I was like, no, I'm done. But they did say, we're going to pay for some therapy for you. Because at one point I was like, hey man, I called you and told you I was thinking about killing myself. Right. And we still kind of had me pastoring for 3 weeks before, and it's I chose it. Right. But in retrospect, they should have said no, right. No. Right. And so they paid for a lot of therapy for me, which was very helpful. Two therapists independently diagnosed me with bipolar 2. And as they described it, one guy said, I think you might have bipolar 2 disorder. And I was like, tell me. And he he described me. He was like, well,
actually, could you describe what it is? Because I'm not very clear about what bipolar 2.
Bipolar 2 is kind of like bipolar light. It's like diet bipolar, where you don't I never was I'm going to paint the entire walls of my house red so I can feel alive. Mm-hmm. It wasn't that. And when the down cycle hit, some people with bipolar, full-blown bipolar, it's the down cycle hits and they're in a psychosis almost, it can get very severe. For me, it would just be a distant sadness that I was unapproachable by my wife, my kids. I would maybe snap at my kids. I was just unhappy, miserable, felt like there was battery acid in my skin, just
in a lot of pain, discomfort. Okay.
It was an emotional misery is what it felt like. And on the upside of that, one of the things that one of the therapists said was if you exercise, you'll do really high intensity exercise and you won't do one class, you'll do 2 in a row. And at that time I'd become friends with the owner of the CrossFit gym, and he and I were training partners, and we would train CrossFit for 2.5 hours a day together.
Which is 2 classes.
So when he said that, I was like,
ding, ding, ding.
Yes.
All right.
He said 5 things like that. Oh. And honestly, Keith, some of what you said to me way back when, because before I ever went on antidepressants 14 years ago, and I've told you this before, but you were the voice that made me feel like I had the freedom to go on antidepressants, because you said, I was like, how do I preach about the joy of the Lord while taking medication to not be sad? And you said, would you take medicine if your heart wasn't working? And I was like, yep. You said, what's the difference, man? Your brain is not producing serotonin. This pill won't fix you, but it will give you a fighting chance to address what you need to address to get better. That's exactly what you said to me like 15 years ago or whenever it was. And so like I had already been on antidepressants, but the bipolar diagnosis, for me, it's just like an unstable mood to where my wife could describe it best because she's the one that watched it. And there are times that I'm not even aware of how an interaction with me looks and feels. There was one time I told my wife, hey, I'm sorry that I've been down the last 2 days. She said, Buzzy, you've been in the pit for 2 weeks.
Wow.
You haven't smiled in 2 weeks. And in my head, I was like, I've got this under control. I know I'm feeling low, but I'm okay. And like, then Bethy would say, nope, you have not been okay. Or sometimes she'll come to me and she'll be like, look, you're manic right now. You're excited about this art show. You're excited about these things you want to write. You're making these TikTok videos. You're just spinning, and it seems exciting because you're up, but there's always inevitably a crash. And so for me, the medication, the mood stabilizers and whatnot, getting out of ministry was like, okay, so I don't have to worry about being fake anymore. Now I just have to unravel from the trauma that I allowed to happen to myself, that I put myself through. But I remember like the mood stabilizers that they put me on, which I'm very grateful. The next step up was like antipsychotics, which felt like scary. Like, am I going to be somebody who's on antipsychotics forever? That's a very scary term. In reality, it's not nearly as scary as it actually sounds now that I know many people on antipsychotics. And it's like, oh, like you're not going to stab somebody. You know, it's like, you're just a normal person. But like the mood swings of like my family never knowing which dad is here today. Like, and you know, all the ideas. And so for me, I realized that the management of the mental illness really needed to be managed in the mania, because that's the part that would always get me in trouble. Because when I felt up, like I would tell everybody, Keith, I'm going to drive to Orange County every week. I'll partner with you in this podcast. I'm going to be there. I'll edit them and I'll learn graphic design. I would like overcommit myself because when you're up, you feel like invincible. You feel like I will always have this energy. I don't even need to sleep more than 4 hours a night, and I could just work. And so I would commit myself to like 5 or 8 things and then crash, let everybody down, disappoint everybody, which only like fed. So it's like, it was just this relentless cycle of I'm up, I'm inspired, and I'm going to conquer the world. And I can't call anybody back. I can't, do anything. And so all of that like kind of crashed at the same time. And now for the last 3 years, I've been unraveling it. And the spiritual path, the spiritual journey was, when I left the church, I was like, well, I'll find a new church or try out Buddhism or whatever. And then COVID hit. And so there was really no options. And in that reprieve, I was like, I'm great without any church. I'm great without any spiritual community here. I feel good. And I feel like the scales fell off of my eyes in the opposite direction. And I'm aware, that pendulum swings really far, in the other direction. And like Rumspringa, like the Amish dude that's like, I can go do anything. And he like goes at it hard. And like, there've been times where it's like, okay, I'm in Rumspringa now. Like, and so I like have gone so far. I quit drinking. And so like my life is better, at least from that. But like,
congrats,
I had to leave church to quit drinking because church was like the traumatic catalyst that I was trying to escape from, or pastoring or whatever, being a part of a community that I didn't fit in. And so now, no church, no prayer, No, I read the Bible once in that first year.
What was that like?
Because it didn't last long.
Yeah.
I started and I was like, I am only doing this because I feel like I'm supposed to. Like the rhythm of it. And so it's like no spiritual disciplines. And I mean, it's like a secular, like I would journal or write out my intentions or stuff like that, which is very similar. And in the departure from the faith and the theology and making like discussing that theology, the primary marker of my identity, I found more joy, more peace. And like, when COVID was kind of ending and things were opening up again, my oldest kid, Captain, wanted to start rock climbing. So we go to this gym, and one of the first people I met there is this amazing person. Their name is Connor, and they were asking me about my tattoos. And I said, well, almost all of my tattoos are based around Christianity, but I'm not even a Christian anymore. And they said, well, that makes me like your tattoos even more then. I was like, cool.
Wow.
So I'm walking through my tattoos, and I said, did you have church in your background? And they said, oh, I'm queer. And I said, so you were rejected by the church then? And they said, oh yeah. And it was great for me in that moment. That was one of the first people I got to encounter in life as just Buzzy, not a pastor, that felt like I have to overcome whatever this person thinks of as a pastor. I have to overcome that obstacle to have a connection with them.
Right, just to meet them on common ground, right? Yeah.
Just you, I'm me. We seem to get along. And that was also one of the very first people that I've ever met that I didn't have like this kind of like back of my mind hope that they became a Christian.
Right.
Like when you're a pastor, a Christian, you kind of want everybody to be a part of it because it's this treasure, man. Like I sold everything and bought the field to have the treasure. It's like the best thing in the world. But even that, it's like, it's supposed to be the best thing in the world. I remember asking like my professors, I was like, we say it's good news, but it has to be bad news first, right? Because you have to tell someone how horrible and disgusting and wretched they are, but God loves you. Like that's the good news. But first you have to accept this premise that you are a debased mistake of the universe. But hey, guess what? There's redemption. So it's like the message just didn't connect. So meeting some people as just a dude that like has a genuine love for humans without the ulterior motive or without like all these kind of like pre-written scripts for this is what you got to try and like get them to believe. It was so exciting. It was like the first time in my life I ever had that. And so I didn't want anything else. It wasn't that I never wanted any other way to engage with people, but to get to experience that. Somebody that from being a little kid just wanted to like entertain people by breakdancing in the living room, like, because it would make them happy and it would make me feel good. And like to just go, I can just go and be with people without all these other agendas. I like that. And so now I will intentionally wear big, long, bright, colorful fingernails to kind of let people know, like, I will love you. I am in with whoever you are. And I have pride flags all over my house that I intentionally show in my videos. And I like talk about, how to embrace new pronouns for people. And like the videos I make, which are the first expression of the fullness of my personality and humor, that I've ever had in life. I've never been able to do that.
That's what I wanted to get into.
Before.
Talk about the videos, because I introduced you to Brandon by showing him a couple of your videos.
Yeah, I actually watched a couple today. I watched your charcuterie plate one, which was hilarious. The first one he ever showed me was your gender pronouns how I clean my oven, which I'll describe it for the folks. It's basically a how I clean my oven TikTok video, but the narration is just like your personal like way that you use and are trying to use pronouns better. And I thought that was it's a very good juxtaposition of like a DIY video, but then there's some real content in there, and it's a great media. It's a great way to use the medium. I really, I'm a very anti-social media generally, and I think that you have a nice way of using it. So thank you for that.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear, man. I appreciate that. And I loved that video. And that video was in my mind for a couple of weeks or maybe even longer, because I thought, man, because I have people in my life that have asked me to refer to them by new pronouns. And it's a weird shift to make, even if I have zero issue with it. It's like even my friend Connor, that I mentioned, they're queer, so they're non-binary. And so they prefer they, them. And even as I was telling you about them, it was like, I mean, she's very femme presenting. She's biological female. And so like, it's just 48 years of referring to someone like that as she or her. And so like, I even did it while we were talking. Yeah, she, they, and so like, I have all these like ideas for how I can practice that. And so figuring out how to put that into that script for that video, and I never know how a video is going to do. I posted a video yesterday, or maybe yesterday, that I love it. And I don't know if it's going to do well, and that doesn't really matter. But that pronoun video has done well, meaning like a lot of people have seen, a lot of people have commented on it. And the beauty of that video are how many people like commented, how do I show this to my parents? How do I get this to my parents? How do I send this to the people in my school? I wish that people in my work. And so I now get to like engage with all of these people. And if nothing else, just let them know like there are safe people out there that are going to love you, that are going to care for you. And it might not be your family, and that sucks, but be patient and you will find us and we will find you. And so like that is, I mean, if that's what sermons were, I'm still writing sermons. Cool. But like, and so some of like that's a good video because it's got a great message. Visually, it's cool. The one I posted yesterday was about when I shit in a bathtub when I was in Europe, and like the fiasco of it all. And like, so there's no redeeming like lesson in that. It's just a weird story.
But it's cut to the visuals of a charcuterie plate being prepared, which I thought was quite hilarious.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so yeah, you saw
I watched that about an hour before we started recording. Yeah, very funny. I was cracking up.
I haven't seen it yet.
The best video, or the best performing video that I've ever had, was making a charcuterie board. And so like kind of charcuterie, like I'm making videos and they would get like 250 views or 300 views. And it's like, okay, whatever. And then I made one charcuterie board video and like 14 million people watched it. And like,
wait, literally 14 million?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
14 million. I think the last time I looked, that's how many people had seen it. And then I posted it in February and it blew up. And I went from like having, 2,000 followers on TikTok to like 140,000 followers like in a week. And so that was very affirming for a creative human being who's never had a response from something I've made, never anything like that. And what that's done, one of your questions for me was going to be about how I find community these days. Yeah. And I read that and I told Beth, I was like, the only way I could think to answer it is I have community. It just doesn't have skin right now because I am connected. Like having videos go viral is cool because it doesn't really feel anything in you. It's cool to go, man, that many people liked my idea. That's cool. But the beauty of it is you get to meet a lot of people that go, I like your ideas. And not only do I like this one that was a hit, I also like this one that only 1,000 people watched. That's a neat idea. And so you kind of meet these people that you have like similar, rhythms with. And so there are people that I may never see in real life, but they are like support. One of them, two friends are getting surgeries in the next few weeks. And Bethany and one of them lives in Oregon, and the other, I don't even know where they live. But we'll probably send meals to them after their surgery. It's like, that's our people. They might not even know my real name, but we know each other's ideas. We've seen each other's success, so it's like, that's really where I find my community these days. And part of it's by choice because I don't really want to do much, like Like
Yeah.
I love you,
Right.
but driving out to Orange County on a Tuesday night, it's like,
Right.
oh
And
man, that's a
forget it.
lot for
Yeah.
me right now.
Yeah.
And I love you.
Mm-hmm.
So like
Right.
I just don't have a whole lot of bandwidth for meeting with people or and so I don't CrossFit anymore. We rock climb some, but like there's real connections for me and people. Like for me, a lot of community for me is like, who do I get to support and love and encourage?
Mm-hmm.
Like those are like my quivers that have never gone empty. And so there's just these people that I've met that are like going through some real struggle in life and coming out of trauma. And so that's the benefit for me of like what's happening on TikTok or Instagram is I'm getting to be connected with these people that might enjoy an affirming voice in their life or just might need humor. And my humor is the humor that connects. And so it's very, very liberating. And I remember when I got on TikTok, I did not promote it. I didn't tell anybody I was doing it. I said, let me see who connects with these ideas without knowing who I am or what my background is. And so that it happened. And it happened with humor that is irreverent or crass or whatever, and beautiful and creative, but was great. It was like, oh, I didn't need to just trade on Pastor Buzzy. It's like, just here it is. So TikTok was an amazing gift to me just because it was like, this is the first place I've ever, and nobody from the church world knew I was there. So I had the freedom without fear of like the comments I was going to get if I cussed or mentioned not being a Christian or whatever. And I posted a couple of videos on Facebook, and most of Facebook is the church connection for me. And that was not fun. The comments, and it's not even that they hurt. It's just disappointing to go, man, I was that guy's pastor for so long, and they're just a dick. They're just mean. They are not kind, and they are not loving, and they are not. And so, like, it's not even that I'm worried about. I guess I am. I don't like bumming people out. And so when I feel like, somebody's disappointed in something I've done, there's at least a 2-second, like, I have to work to release that and not let it impact me. But I also hate these encounters with people that I used to be in church with, because I just look at them and feel so bummed that they're so unaccepting and so unloving. Not all of them, obviously, but some of them. And it's like, how do you reconcile that? So I know that sounds super judgy, but one of the cool things about not being a Christian is I get to be judgmental now without fear or guilt.
Right. Yep, or need to confess later and all that stuff. Yeah.
And you got such good practice doing it as a Christian that you're probably pretty good at it now.
Yes, right. So yeah, man, that's a little bit of how social media has been a beautiful part of just the development of me interacting with people, and there's a freedom in entertaining strangers too.
Yeah.
And having learned to not use that for my soul, like food, for my manna, because Keith, you remember, like, you preach a rock and roll sermon and you're on top of the world, and then you preach a dud and you're like, God,
right. When
when you're using that for your piece of soul, it's scary. And then, like, when I have a video go viral, it's certain it inspires the mania, just because people are probably my drug of choice. And when all of a sudden I get to interact with 100,000 people that are commenting, and I get to banter back. So it's like a drug addict going, here's an unlimited supply of whatever it is you want.
Right.
And so I like all that engagement and trading wit with people. But even in the last year, I've kind of gone, okay, when that's there, it's cool. But if it's not, I'm still good. I'm still cool. And so, which is a neat thing to have come to.
That's a great place to evolve to. Brandon, were you going to ask a question?
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, it's funny you mentioned mania and social media, because I think one of the things that when you get in a manic state is you're in this unrealistic, like you said, it's like you're basically making a 40-hour workday for yourself and acting like it's going to work out. But there is this sort of pseudo reality towards it where it's like, well, this idea that I could get 1 million followers overnight. It's like, well, that actually is technically possible with this tool. Is it realistic? Do we get that? But yeah, have you found that that's maybe affected that? Or maybe it's a healthier way to put that energy. It's like if you want to get 10,000 people to see your thing, but you're just alone in your bedroom, that's not the same. But if you're actually getting a hold of them, do you feel like it makes those bigger kind of outlandish plans more of a reality, and that therefore healthier for you to kind of put your focus there?
I don't know if I really understand exactly what you're asking.
Or I guess what I'm saying is, when do you feel like it's more of a healthy way to entertain people? Do you think that's like, I sometimes worry that mania is like a repressed creativity, and that maybe now that you're getting a little more of that out. I mean, also you mentioned you're on medication, but do you feel like maybe the performing and getting out to lots of people was something that you were missing, and now that it's there and you don't need to kind of...
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Yes, that was a really cool, exciting thing. And to watch that number of followers or likes or whatever, keep going up or increasing, that was a neat thing. It was a validation to just feel like I do have ID. Because I think before that, like my one video that really sent me, and I've had a bunch go viral since then, but like that one, right before that, I was thinking like, maybe I'm not funny. I always thought I was funny,
right?
But maybe I'm not. I don't know, maybe not. And then this video hits, and I was like, Lauren Michaels might call me.
Yeah,
I might be writing on SNL next week. Right. Your mind's like, what could this be? And now, like a year later, kind of going like, oh, it's still nothing. Like the video's doing well. It's fun. I mean, I'll make a video. The video I posted yesterday, I love it. The one you watched, I love that video. I love that story. I have wondered how to tell that story publicly to adults for like 20 years. Wow. Because that happened in 1998. And I've only ever really told that when I was speaking for like high school kids. Because you can't, like on a Sunday morning, you can't, I could never figure it out. So finally having a place that I get to share that story in the full detail of being able to share, like talk about it and talk about like wading in the shit, literally shit water, like that's how I always wanted to tell that story. But like only being able to say crap or whatever when you're preaching. Right. Like, I love being able to go, here's some stories. Here's my life. I want to talk about the pain. I want to talk about the joy. I want to joke and be irreverent and make you guys think I'm serious and not be serious. And sometimes things connect with a lot of people. Sometimes they don't. And I've learned to just enjoy. Like, I spent like 3 days making that charcuterie video. Like 1 day shooting it, 2 days writing it and whittling the script down. Wow. But I love that process. That process is really, really energizes me, in a fun way, the same way that like that little boy wanted that General Lee so he could entertain people. Like now I just have it. I have it through this, and I don't know, it could all go away tomorrow. And it's okay. Like I'm fine with who I am now for maybe the first time. Ever. I mean, there's still like, I'm still sick. I'm still like have those down days and have to manage the mania. And I don't have much bandwidth these days. Like, I think I had to send like 5 emails today. And this morning I was like, oh God, how am I going to get through the day? Like, there's some times that like, I'm just kind of going through this life reset, kind of figuring out, but here's like one of the scary parts of having your faith crumble and your career and your profession crumble is like, I find myself kind of like hesitant or almost uninspired to pursue the next thing, because it's like, how do I know that's not going to crumble, or when will that crumble? Like that's a real, gut punch. to have your faith dissolve when that was everything, because now I'm kind of going like, well, what do I do next? And how long until that falls apart? And like, I'm aware of that and trying to set those thoughts in the right place as I kind of figure out what's next. What am I going to do? What am I going to be? And, you know, the main role right now is being the primary care parent. And it turns out I'm good at parenting, like, which I'm very, very happy with. Like, that I love my kids and love time with them, and, you know, love driving them to school and picking them up and making their lunches and doing all of that. And so I have this gift in a wife who's willing to work full time right now and be the financial support of the family, and have this breather to kind of go, okay, let's figure this out, since I'm unraveling and still just trying to figure out who I am. And, you know, if like you repressed a big part of yourself for the bulk of your life, it's a weird thing to start using those parts of you publicly and kind of testing the waters to see what will happen. And so that's kind of where social media was able to tell me, like, hey, these parts of you are okay. Like, yeah, we're with you. Maybe those people aren't with you, but we're with you.
Yeah.
And that's a neat validation. It's not the only thing, but it certainly helps to have people telling you that you're in the pocket with them.
Dude, I love that. I want to just point out just a couple of things I'm noticing that, you know, it's not rocket science, but I think it's worth saying is just number one, you and your wife were willing to explore and navigate and journey together through the different roles, right? And
oh yeah,
and for you guys to land where, hey, she's got, you know, a job that pays and that she enjoys doing every day, and you got this thing called, you know, being available to be a parent that you are digging doing. And from the stories you've already told about your mom and dad, have some amazing, you know, examples also. Not that Bethy doesn't, but it's just right. Like, that's just what you've got. And, and that it gives you some free time in between, you know, when kids are at school, whatever else, to then also make these videos and do social media, which is kind of like this outlet. Like, it's, you know, like you said, it's this art form, and it's, instead of you prepping a sermon and then giving it to however many hundreds or thousands heard it on Sunday and then might, you know, watch it Facebook Live or whatever, it's living in this new space for people to enjoy. And it's creating this opportunity for you to be an advocate and a friend to a whole new segment of people that you never got to interact with and love the way Buzzy really wanted to love before, right? You had so many limitations in how we as people in ministry could love, right? In a practical, in a real way, right? The invitation, the welcome mat we could put out wasn't, you know, wasn't real big at times, right? So anyways, I just love that you guys were willing to explore and navigate and be in the process together as you're figuring out what you're good at, what Bethy's good at, how you're going to do this thing called parenting and bills and family together, you know, all at the same time.
Yeah, it's a gift. It is. I feel like this little patch of days, and I really feel like it's a gift that my wife in many ways has given me, because when she watched me, like when I left the church, one of the first people I told was the CrossFit guy that I was training with. He was probably like my best friend at the time, the person, I spent 2.5 hours a day with the dude suffering. And, so I was bonded, like really connected with this guy. And I said, hey, I'm not going to be a pastor anymore. Here's what's going on. And I gave him every detail, and he was rad. He was like, hey, I will be at least one of the only people that will have zero judgment for you at all. Like, he started coming to the church. Like, him and his wife and kids were there. They were at the church. And I think when I told him I wasn't a pastor anymore, he was probably like, oh, cool. Like, I can stop going to church then.
Right.
And he told me, he goes, you should do home loans. And so like, I was like, yeah, okay, I got to do something. So I got into the mortgage business and had a full blown emotional nervous breakdown. Like I was a mess. And so after that, my wife just kind of went, just take a break. Take a break. Like, we'll give you time. We'll give you a breather.
Wow.
And so it's a real gift from her. And she'll come home from work and she'll have had a rough day. And I'll go, how was your day? And she'll say, well, I had to deal with this and, you know, these parents, and this was tough. And I had to call this doctor, or, you know, had to call the paramedic. She's a school nurse. And she'll just kind of go, yeah, it was really tough. And I go, yeah, that's cool. Can I show you the new TikTok I spent the whole day making? And she says, yes.
Wow.
Let me see it. Let me see. Oh, wow, that's a good one. That's a good one. That's great. And so it's like, I have had 2 family members call me in the last month and ask if I needed to borrow money. So it's like, it's not all great. like some of my family members are like, are you okay, man? But yeah, and Bethy's faith kind of like deconstructed just a little bit behind mine. Like if I was going 80 miles an hour, she was going 60. And so she caught up, and which is wonderful, like to be united in that. And so there's a freedom to discuss it or to vent or to, so yeah, Bethy has been a real gift.
That's awesome.
Along with everybody else. And people like you that, you know, I've been able to process with throughout all of it. Dude, I remember once, like you were getting ready to kind of do some like executive coaching with me and Buzzy. And I came to the first meeting with you and I said, Keith, I sat down to do this homework and thought, what's the least I can do to make Keith feel like I care about this? And you said, Buzzy, you're not going to do coaching with me right now, and that's okay. I was like, thank you, man.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
Like, there was no judgment. There was no,
man.
If there was any disappointment, you hit it well. And like,
dude.
So yeah, I am grateful to have been connected with you. And Brandon, I'm sure you're great. I mean, maybe you're a train wreck. I don't know, but like, I bet I would be very grateful.
60% fraud. What'd you say? 60% con man? Yeah.
40 to 60. Yeah. Brandon's amazing. That was part of what, you know, for me, this whole podcast was like wanting, because I'm just digging Brandon so much. He's like this. I mean, he's how old are you, Brandon?
33.
And I'm 57. So, dude, he could be my kid.
Yeah. My dad is a year older than you, actually.
Okay,
and both my parents are a year older than you. So
but you know, he's got this old soul, but he's just so freaking kind. And how, you know, and then we found out as we started talking that we also like hearing people's stories. And then we realized we cover a lot of ground together that we couldn't cover that's separate. Like how would you say, there's overlap, but there's also
I think at our core we're very similar, but our networks are very different. We were saying we're like a perfectly balanced trivia team. It's like he's got the sports, we both kind of have movies, religion. You know, we have a nice, and the age range is nice. So on the podcast in the future, there'll be some people my age and
younger.
I don't know, it's like our networks, when we link them together, the Venn diagram kind of you know, it kind of goes together, which is a nice thing for a community that's trying to be very inclusive, right?
Yeah.
That's great.
So,
hey,
go ahead. Yes.
I was going to say, like, we're coming up on 2 hours.
Yeah.
Or actually, I think we talked for about half an hour before we started recording. But so if you have some other questions, but I have that would you rather I want to.
Oh, right.
Yeah, do your would you rather, and then we'll just do a wrap up couple of comments.
Okay.
So do your would you rather.
All right. So here's my would you rather. First, would you say that music or film is more important to you? Or more preferable?
That's not the would you rather. That's a pre-question.
No. This is how I frame the would you rather.
Okay, so what is more important to my life, music or films?
Yes.
Music.
We'll just go with music. We'll just go with music. I don't need to make you commit to something, but okay. Would you rather only be able to listen to Dave Matthews Band? That's the only music you get forever. Or you cut your pinky off with garden clippers, or your pinky toe, mind you, your pinky toe, and you have all music, but no Dave Matthews Band.
What am I cutting off again? Pinky toe?
Your pinky toe.
Pinky toe.
Right or left. You choose, and you have to do it yourself.
Oh, okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
While listening to the Dave Matthews album you like the most for the last time.
And the only song you can listen to while cutting your toe off is Crash.
Yeah,
That's it.
Right.
On loop, as long as it takes you to build up the nerve.
Yeah, I
It's a
soundtrack
tough
my
one.
life, so I'd have to be limping around putting on my old
Yeah.
40s jazz songs. So yeah, I'd have a cane. That just add to my old guy weirdness. I get a cane with the doorknob, crystal doorknob. Yeah, so I'd say left toe, goodbye.
All right. Hey, Brandon, I hate to bum you out, but that's the wrong answer.
Oh, really?
I know you think it's just about you, but it's really about like what I think is best for you. And I think you got to keep that pinky toe, but
Yeah.
But I appreciate you trying, man.
There you go. All right.
All right, Keith.
Yeah.
Pinky toe, Dave Matthews Band. Where do you land?
Dave Matthews Band. I'm the biggest pussy. I could not cut off a toe.
You know what? That is the wrong answer. You guys are not good at this.
Man.
game.
Wow.
You both said the wrong thing, but I do appreciate.
Yeah.
I could cut off my pinky toe. I could probably just do it to entertain people at a party.
You probably,
like, I don't.
Right. Just for followers.
So for followers. Dude, I film almost it's a discipline now. Like if I'm having a day with my family, I will intentionally go, I'm not recording anything. Yeah. Like this is just me with my family, because you just get so addicted to just wanting to make sure everything is captured just in case. And
right.
So it's a discipline for me. So, hey, thank you guys for doing that. Would you rather?
Yes,
so if you wanted to do that, I appreciate that. I asked my wife that question right before we started. She's like, what? What are we, why are you? I was like, I don't know. I'm bored.
So I got one question for you. So, it might roll into two. No, it's one. So Brandon and I are doing this podcast, and we're doing the Kind community, and it's really we are excited because we live in Costa Mesa, and we're looking for a lot of it to just be in real life stuff. We want it to be high touch, you know. But we know this podcast other people are going to listen to, and there are going to be people who I know are hearing my story, your story, Brandon's story, especially some of our audience, and they're going to be hyper, you know, whether it's critical or say, oh, those guys, you know, whatever, right, about the faith stuff and the deconstruction. But there are also going to be people who are listening who are in a difficult spot right now, and they're in pain, they're suffering, they are deconstructing, or they're in that space, Buzzy, and you get them, right? What words of encouragement, hope, action, support would you want to lay on them that are listening to this right now?
Yeah, man. So this is not my story, or not my analogy. And this, I don't know if everybody's heard this, but this is what came to mind when you said that. It's the story of a dude who falls in a pit, right? And he can't get out of the pit. And he's at the bottom of the pit, and it's like 15-foot walls, can't climb, they're too smooth. And like this guy walks by and he says, hey, can you help? And the guy at the top, he was like, oh yeah, I can help you out of there. No problem. He's like, great, throw a rope down. And the guy jumps into the pit with him. And the guy who was in the pit was like, you idiot. Now we're both down here. And the guy goes, oh yeah, but I've been down here before and I know the way out. And so like, when I heard that, I actually heard it, Aaron Sorkin, I heard it on The West Wing is where I heard that the first time. Wow. And I was like, I love it, because when I'm talking with people that are in depression that I'm going to walk with, it's like, oh, I know the way out. I know the way out. And so the people that are out there suffering, maybe your families are not adopting your new pronouns, or they're dead naming you, or they rejected you altogether, or your marriage is falling apart, whatever it is, your faith, deconstructing your faith is brutal. Like there is no part of it that's enjoyable. It's relearning to walk. It's, for me, has been miserable. Like I'm free on the other side of it, but like you constantly are realizing that some of your like framed realities are wrong. And it's like, wait, I thought I had that one solved. Right, you're constantly realizing like, oh man, like my understanding of world history needs to be like relearned. At one point, like about a year into deconstruction, my wife asked me, a question about the Middle East. And I was like, well, the Canaanites, she's like, that's the Bible. What really happened? And I was like, oh shit. Like I had like the history of the Middle East kind of solved in my mind because I knew the Old Testament, and like realizing that needs to be completely reworked. So all of that stuff, you're going through deconstruction, depression, mental illness, medication. Like there are people that know the way out. You just got to let them into the pit with you.
That's good. That's great.
They're hard to find, but they're there.
Yep. Yeah, you're not alone, right?
Yeah.
It's good.
And I wish I could be in the pit with everybody.
I know, right? Yeah.
I would jump in with everybody, but the reality is I could probably do that for 3 people actually in life.
Yeah. And that's okay, but through this messaging that you're getting to create social media, the wide end of the funnel, is it just at least sending these hopeful messages, right? And I guess that was going to be the other thing. If you could just give the world one message, or, one giant poster board size message that you could give the world, what would you want it to say?
Oh, I would want to tell people, don't allow yourself to be 40 to 60% con man. And if you're in a space where that's how you're surviving, be willing to like rewrite the space. And it's hard. It's hard to change a life. It is really, really hard. But it's worth the work. It's worth the work. And so I would tell people, like, learn how to be like comfortable with what and who you are, and the people that you might lose when you do that, like you don't have them now anyway. They're already not actually with you. They just don't know it, and you just don't know it. And so I would, like, for me, learning to be comfortable with who I am has been the actual joy. And I just never could do it in that old world.
Yeah. Dude, right on. Good words, man. Yeah. Thank you. I'm gonna just tell you thank you, and I love you, and this has been amazing. I'm gonna let Brandon though just have final words.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on this podcast. It was great. You're our first phone-in interview, so we got to test that out today and find out that it works great. It's really cool. That opened us up a lot. Now that we know this works, we could maybe interview anybody. So if you got any good suggestions, let us know too. And
I do, and I will. But yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for accommodating the phone call, because I really did want to connect with you for this, Keith and Brandon, but this was just the only way I could really feasibly make it happen. And it would be rad. It's better in person for sure.
Sure.
But this also felt very natural to me.
This works. All right, my friend. We will catch you on the other side, and I'll follow up with you, let you know all the details about this, and get some more stuff from you, because we want to let people know where all the. Well, I guess we can tell.
Yeah, plug. Or you can find us at kindnessrising.community. You can find us on Instagram at kindness_rising. Facebook is Kindness Rising. YouTube Kindness Rising. That's right. Yeah, just look us up.
And then Buzzy, where can people find you?
On TikTok, I am at BuzzFunk. 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 And then on Instagram, I'm at Buzzy Funk. Okay. Somebody else had BuzzFunk. And
got it.
Even though they don't make any charcuterie videos, they wouldn't let me have it. Actually, I don't even know if we asked them. I think my friend might have asked them if we could have it, because continuity. But yeah, BuzzFunk or Buzzy Funk. Okay, come say hi.
All right, Buzzy, man. Thank you. Thanks for this time. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I love you, Keith and Brandon. Right. I mildly like you so far.
Oh, that's good. We'll hope we can work on that next time. All right. See you later.
It's gonna get up to a real strong infatuation quickly.
There you go.
I can tell.
There you go.
All right, dude.
All right. Thank you, guys.
All right. Bye.
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 As always, the Kindness Rising podcast is brought to you by Kindness Rising. Kindness Rising is a community organization committed to inspiring, equipping, and resourcing people to lead lives that flourish, grounded in kindness, and aimed at making the world a better place. For more information, please visit our website at kindnessrising.community. There you can find out about our upcoming events, how to get involved. You can sign up for our newsletter, find out more information about this podcast, or even donate. Kindness Rising is supported solely by the generous contribution of our lovely donors, so if you would like to help support us, please go to kindnessrising.community/donate.